Talking about Evanston Township High School bringing back segregation with respect to AP calculus classes, one class restricted to students who identify as black, all genders. Another class restricted to students who identify as Latinx, all genders. Mark Perry is a professor emeritus of econ and finance at the University of Michigan. He's also a American Enterprise Institute scholar. I think emeritus now. He's emeritus. He's living the good life. But thankfully, he's still on the prowl when it comes to Title IX and Title VI violations in education in particular. In education. And he saw this post I made on the AP Calculus course offerings at Evanston Township High School and jumped on the case. He filed a complaint with the Chicago Office for Civil Rights versus Evanston Township High School for illegal race-based and sex-based discrimination in violation of Title VI and Title IX. He looked through the catalog per the link I posted and found additional courses that are violative of federal law.
And he wrote the ETHS board members a letter, which is good.
And this is someone who has filed more than 800 federal civil rights complaints against colleges, universities, and K-12 schools, which have resulted in nearly 400 federal civil rights investigations to date and more than 300 resolutions in his favor. So he's trying to prevent us from going back to the Jim Crow days while the left in charge of these school systems, incredibly, is trying to bring us back. I don't know how else to say it. That's accurate. Mark Perry, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hey, yeah, this is just pure, straight-up racial discrimination and racial segregation. And actually, I was alerted to your tweet by a member of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights by an email. So that's how I found out about it. And so that's what then inspired me to file the complaint. And as you said, I have more experience in this area than anybody in the history of U.S. civil rights enforcement. And so saw this as a clear violation of Title VI and Title IX because they have one pre-calculus course that's only for black males. So now you're discriminating not just based on race, but then on sex as well. And then there's three courses that are for Latinx only, and then a calculus section that's for black students only. So yeah, a total of 5 courses that identified in my complaint filed with the Chicago Office for Civil Rights. I'm confident I'll prevail on this. I mean, this is just legally indefensible, morally objectionable, so there's no way I believe that the Office for Civil Rights would say that this is okay. I mean, I've been through this.
Just to set a baseline, sorry to interrupt, but just to set a baseline, explain Title VI and Title IX to us.
Yeah, Title VI was part of the original Civil Rights Act of 1964. There were 11 different sections or titles. Title VI is for racial discrimination being unlawful and prohibited for institutions that accept federal financial assistance, which is all colleges and universities, almost all K through 12 schools and school districts, hospitals, medical centers. And so it's illegal on the basis to discriminate on the basis of race, color, or national origin when they accept the federal financial assistance, which is Pell Grants, federally insured student loans, and so on. Then sex was not a protected class as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the feminists lobbied for an amendment in 1972 to have sex added. So basically any school district or college or university that accepts federal financial assistance, they have to agree to actively enforce Title IX and Title VI, but they don't. I've found more than 2,000 violations of Title IX and Title VI, mostly in higher education, but some in K through 12, like in this case. So it's just completely illegal, indefensible. There's no way they can defend this, and so the Office for Civil Rights will accept complaints, administrative complaints, from individuals like myself or anybody else, and you don't need legal standing. You don't file on behalf of an individual because you're not suing for, penalties or fines or anything, damages. You're just saying this university or the school district accepts federal financial assistance. They're obligated to enforce Title VI and Title IX. They're violating Title IX, Title VI. Please investigate and resolve this case with a change that would correct their violation.
Well, how long has this been going on at Evanston Township High School? Especially the class with just black males only.
Well, in that link that Dan provided yesterday on Twitter, that is a list of all of their classes. They have all of the classes coming up for 2023-2024 school year. They have some classes during this summer, and then they had the classes for 2022-2023. And when I looked under the current year's academic classes, the current academic year, I didn't find any of these segregated classes. So maybe this is their new idea starting in the fall of 2023.
There's some who asserted in response to what I posted that all this is a code to track track performance by race. So it won't actually be blacks and Latinos and whites in different classes. However, from a Daily Northwestern story about what Evanston Township High School was setting about to do this January of this year, the report is this, I'm quoting, ETHS also offers other classes specifically intended for black students, including an AP Calculus class reserved for students who identify as black. So I actually think that they're wrong, these people saying, oh, it's just coding and everybody will be thrown together. It's not. It sounds to me like it actually is segregated classes, and this isn't the first instance we've seen of this at K through 12. I mentioned before you joined us, there was a mom who's in an elementary school in Atlanta where her daughter was literally in a class for black students only, and there were other classes for white students only. So this is happening. People just can't believe it, but it is happening. But I wanted to get your response if it was what they say. I don't think it is, but if it was what they say hypothetically, and it was just coding to track performance, is that violative of Title VI and or 9?
Well, it would kind of depend on the details, but when I looked at that class schedule, there were 3 AP Calculus AB classes. One's for blacks only, one's for Latinx only, and then there's one open section that doesn't have any kind of racial restriction. So to me, that suggests that they are racially segregating because they've got 3 different classes. So the white or Asian students would take the class that's open, and then the black or Latinx students, Latinx students, would take the classes that are designated for them.
I mean, since you have such a breadth of and depth of experience here, I mean, 800 federal civil rights complaints, 300 in your favor. I mean, it sort of makes the point I'm trying to make is like how expansive this is. I mean, I'm thinking of Andrew Sullivan's famous line that about our culture, what happens on a college campus, or we're all on a college campus now. What happens on colleges doesn't stay there. It goes to K through 12 and it goes to larger culture. And that's happening, but particularly college to K through 12 with this racialization.
Yeah, and it's happening all the time. And at the college level and now K through 12 level, they're continually introducing new programs that discriminate on the basis of race or sex. And so it really demonstrates either a widespread unawareness of how federal civil rights laws operate, or, some kind of inexcusable lack of concern about violating the civil rights of certain students. And so when new programs like this are introduced, they often never go through a legal review. So at the college level, they would never come up with a new BIPOC only or black only program or scholarship and ask the Office of General Counsel to give it a legal review for legal clearance. They just introduce it because they think either this sounds good or they think that there's some, if you have good intentions, exception to Title IX or Title VI. So they just introduce it, and then I catch it and then flag it and file a complaint. Often I'll try to then send a courtesy copy to the Office of General Counsel at a university, and then often the programs get corrected right away. So it's like they don't even realize it's a violation once they're made aware of it. They sometimes will correct it. So in a case like this, we'll have to see, because as Amy said, I couldn't find a legal representative for the school district, but I sent it to the entire school board and all of the math teachers to see if there would be some kind of reaction at the school board, who's responsible ultimately for this type of racial discrimination, to see if they'll do something during the maybe 1 or 2 year process that it might take for the Office for Civil Rights to evaluate this, investigate it, and then resolve it.
Well, how do you think this makes white students feel if they know about this and they can't participate in the classes?
Well, I think it just reinforces this narrative that they're pushing at the K through 12 level and in higher education, that white students are guilty of white privilege and that they're oppressors, and based on their skin color, and then the blacks and Latinx are oppressed and they're victims. And so it just creates this whole false narrative about, life in America. And again, as you've been talking about, Dan, it's like we're going back to the 1950s. We're going back to Jim Crow or back to racial segregation. So it's not moving us forward towards a colorblind society. It's moving us backwards towards a color-conscious society that we were trying to get away from, including with the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Yeah. I think that's where they want to go. By the way, why don't I ever hear anything about Asian privilege in these conversations? Interesting. It's just always whites are the oppressors, and Asians are sort of never addressed by these identitarians. So Brown v. Board of Education was, of course, segregated schools in toto. So apparently you couldn't do separate but unequal in Topeka, Kansas. That was the Brown decision. But you can do separate but equal, I should say, in Topeka, Kansas. You couldn't do that. That was the Brown decision. But you can do separate but equal within a school system is, I guess, the argument that the identitarian left is making. And I'd love to hear somebody on their side make it, because that's what stories like this are essentially suggesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's just that, we fought for civil rights. We fought for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's supposed to be enforced uniformly for everybody to protect the federally guaranteed civil rights of all Americans. Now we're, again, segregating and separating students by race, and then saying that some students get their own special section and other ones don't. So, yeah, it's not defensible legally, and then it's also, morally, it's just objectionable and reprehensible that we would be going backwards and segregating based on skin color.
Completely. It's I can't believe parents, if they know about this, would tolerate any more than that mom in Atlanta would tolerate this. Nobody, it seems to me, really thinks this is a good idea, except these dyed-in-the-wool Marxist ideologues.
They want to say they're doing something.
Good grief! It's shocking. I think people have a hard time believing it, which is why the facts need to be extolled over and over again. And also complaints like the ones you filed need to be lodged. Mark Perry, professor emeritus of econ and finance, University of Michigan, a full-time civil rights activist now, and he is on the case when it comes to Evanston Township High School's arguably illegal AP course offerings. Mark Perry, thanks so much for hopping on this and joining us to discuss it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
If you have the bulk of your retirement accounts in a 401k or IRA, I have bad news for you. These accounts could be a major problem moving forward. Hi, this is best-selling author and tax specialist Navy Dowdy, right here in the Chicago area. In a few short years, we're going to have a major problem in this country. By 2030, Congress will be forced to raise taxes due to the cost of Social Security, interest on the national debt, and Medicare.